one of my favorite moments of the whole week. That bridge from that breath of there is so much love in this place to standing here in this place and looking at all that love. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that again. My name is Annette Mize, and I'm on the Spiritual Council here at the Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta, and it is my joy to be back with you once again this month. All month we've been hearing about opening and awakening the global heart. We've learned about the power of love and what that has to do with our hearts and the global heart. We've learned about initiation and the hero's journey. And today we're going to talk a little bit about mythology and story and how these things are a part of that awakening of the global heart. Now, one of the things that we sometimes think of when we think of myth, and this is actually one of the myths I want to bust. I titled my talk today, Myth Busting and Myth Building. How many of you remember Mythbusters? Do you remember it used to come on the Discovery Channel? It came on for 14 seasons, Mythbusters, and they would take common thoughts and ideas, common myths and urban legends, and they would bust them. They would prove them either right or wrong. Most of the time they proved them false. So we're going to bust a few myths today, and we're going to look at building some myth ideas and building some story with that power of myth. So one of the first myths I want to bust it goes like this. You see, a lot of times we think of myth as being something that primitive people use to explain natural phenomena, things that happen in nature. For example, myths might be used to explain thunder or lightning or as powers of the gods, or myths might be used to explain winter or famine, that kind of thing. And we're all familiar with that kind of idea. But I want to offer that that is a primitive way of looking at myth, actually, because I like to look at myth as a way that we use natural phenomena, natural occurrences, to explain, understand, and teach around personal growth and around personal interactions. And so one of my favorite myths for that I'm going to share with you today. This is the myth of, it's a Sumerian myth. It's a myth about Ereshkigal and Inanna. Now, Ereshkigal was the queen of the underworld, the mighty queen of the underworld. And Inanna was her mighty sister, the queen of the heavens, or the queen of the overworld. And one day, Ereshkigal was weeping so strongly and so loudly, and Inanna had heard this weeping from the heavens for so long that Inanna thought to herself, my goodness, when is my sister going to get over this? You see, Ereshkigal had lost her husband. And for weeks and weeks she had wept, and her weeping would cause the earth to shake, and the earth shaking would cause the animals to stop giving milk. The cows stopped giving milk, the animals stopped breeding, the flowers stopped blooming for all the noise that Ereshkigal's weeping caused. And Inanna, finally, she had had enough. And she thought to herself in her palace in the heavens, she thought, surely Ereshkigal simply needs a visit from her sister. The Queen of Heaven will go and visit with Ereshkigal, and she will make all well again. So Inanna prepared herself for this visit to the underworld. She donned her best crown. She put on her finest jewelry, and she donned her fabulous clothes, and she trekked on to the underworld. Now, when Inanna reached the first gate to the underworld, she met the guard of the gate, and the guard of the gate said, you may not enter like this. And Inanna said, but I am the Queen of Heaven. I will enter wherever I please. And he said, not here. Not like that. You must give me your crown. And so Inanna was incensed. What? I am the Queen of Heaven. I will not give you my crown. He says, if you want to go down there and visit your sister, you will. So she thought about it, and again she hears Ereshkigal's thundering cries, and she thought, I have to go save my sister from this weeping and this gnashing of teeth. So she takes her crown and she gives it to the guard. Fine, you can have my crown. She reaches the next gate, and the guard says, I need the earrings. All this jewelry, it's got to go. It's got to go. You can't go through the gate with all this jewelry on. Oh, fine. And she takes her earrings off. She takes her necklace off. For 7 gates this took place. At each of the 7 gates, she had to remove some form of finery, some level, some layer of her greatness. She took and she gave to the guard, until finally at the 7th gate she was wearing nothing but her loincloth, and the guard yet again said, you're not going in there with that. Are you kidding me? You want my loincloth? Yes, you have to give your loincloth. So finally she took the loincloth, gave it to the guard, and made her way into Ereshkigal's lair. Now Ereshkigal was weeping and moaning and crying, laying on her sofa, just weeping and sobbing and crying. And she heard Inanna come in, and she looks up. What are you doing here? Why, sister, I have come to make you feel better. I've come to bless you with my presence. The Queen of Heaven has come to your realm to help you through this loss. I have lost my husband. My heart is breaking. I weep not just for myself. I weep for all the lovers who have lost their loved one. I weep for all the children that have lost their mothers. I weep for all the parents that have lost their children. And you think your visit is going to make me stop? And she became furious, and she snapped her fingers, and Inanna fainted dead away, and she snatched Inanna up and hung her on a meat hook. And then she went back to her weeping and her crying and her gnashing of teeth. Her weeping and her sobbing. Now, Enki, the god of wisdom, he witnessed this whole thing. And he was like, oh, there's some family drama going on here. I don't really want to get involved in this, because he was wisdom now, okay? I don't really want to get it between the sisters here. But after a while, Inanna was gone, and Ereshkigal's still crying, and the cows still aren't giving milk, and winter has been on the land for a long, long time. And so Enki said, I got to do something about this. And so he called 3 of his servants to him. And he said, listen, you guys have to go down there. And they were like, what, me? Really? Yes, you got to go down there, and you got to do something about this. We've got to fix this problem, because the people on the land, they're perishing because of this, all this family drama going on here. So we got to do something about it. And so the 3 servants looked at one another, and Enki says, I've got an idea. And so he told them all, he had them shrink down to the tiniest of little flies. Little gnats they became, his 3 servants. And so as the little gnats, they descended to the underworld to take care of whatever was going on down there. So they were able to slide right by the gates because they were so small, the gatekeepers didn't even see them. And as they entered the room, they surveyed what was going on. There's Inanna hanging on the meat hook. There's Ereshkigal weeping and sobbing on the sofa. They buzzed around for a moment. Okay, we got this. They go over to Ereshkigal, and together they said to her, Ereshkigal, Ereshkigal, what is it that troubles you so? They knew what was troubling Ereshkigal. They thought they knew. And so they stayed there quiet and small. Ereshkigal, Ereshkigal, what troubles you so? And Ereshkigal answered, my heart hurts so bad. My heart weeps in pain. My heart feels as though it is broken. And one of the gnats replied to Ereshkigal, your heart hurts so. Your heart is filled with pain. Your heart feels as though it is broken. And they stayed in the silence a moment. And Ereshkigal said, I weep for those that have lost. I fear I will never be whole again. And the second gnat said to Ereshkigal, you weep for those that have lost. You feel as though you will never be whole again. And the third time she speaks, I feel as though I will never be able to stop crying. And the third gnat replies to her, mirrors back to her, you feel as though you will never be able to stop crying. And then they sat in the quiet for a moment. And Ereshkigal began to sit up. She took a deep breath. She said, yeah. She dried her eyes. She said, you three gnats of wisdom, you have done a miracle today. I feel as though I can go on. I would give you a gift. What is it that you wish for? And they said, well, now that you ask, we'd like to take Inanna back to her home. And Ereshkigal says, my sister. All right, fine, you may have her. And so the gnats gathered Inanna up and took her back to the overworld, where spring could come and the cows would give milk again and things could return to normal. Now, when I tell this story, I'm usually telling this story when I'm in training with prayer chaplains, or I'm telling this story for teaching caregivers, because I like to use this story to help teach people how to be in pastoral care. Can you see why? When we go into a situation to help people, wearing all of our finery, I'm going to take all my money and help them, or I'm going to take all my wisdom and smarts and fix their problem. It's not so much going to fix their problem. It's not doing honor to what their need is. But when we can be still and quiet and mirror back to the other that we wish to help, what is their need? Mirroring it back helps them realize what their need is. So I like to use this myth for that teaching purpose. But the myth can be told in many, many different ways, and used for many different things. It just depends on what the need is, and that's how we use it for the teaching. So that first myth I want to bust is that stories and myths are just about the story and the myth. It's not a primitive, it's not a thing that primitive people use. It's a technology that can be used to teach and to understand. Another way of looking at that same story is from a psychological view. even beyond pastoral care. Traveling to the underworld is about going into the subconscious, and Inanna represents consciousness, or it could be the mind. Inanna represents the mind, and Ereshkigal represents the heart. So you see how these stories can teach on multiple different levels. So the next myth I want to bust is the idea that all the myths have already been written, you see. That myths are just about Zeus or Thor or Ereshkigal and Inanna. Myths can be told in the future. Imagine for a moment if we were 2,000 years from now. Imagine people sitting around a fire telling a story about a powerful, wise being whose skin was the color of chocolate. A powerful, wise being who, when he opened his mouth to speak, it was like thunder in the heavens. A powerful, wise being whose eyes could look at you and see the truth, or who could look at a group of people and pull from them their best and highest good. Who might I be telling a story about? Any guesses? Martin Luther King Jr. Obama. One of the most people filled with integrity I've ever seen on the public stage. The story in the future. Imagine now, 2,000 years from now, I tell a story about a tiny man who was filled with strength and courage, a tiny man who was able to go days on end without eating, a tiny man who came upon a well one day, a well that was used historically for the untouchables, the people who were ill and sick. But when he bathed in that well, it became a well of healing and blessing. A tiny man who brought an empire to its knees with a grain of salt. Who would I be talking about? Gandhi. I would be talking about Gandhi. Unfortunately, though, many times we leave these stories to institutions to tell. School tells history. I want us to bring these stories back out of the institutions and back to the fireplace, back to the hearth, back to the kitchen table. And so if we tell these stories to our children, they would be less and less about dates and specific things. This happened on this date, that happened on that date. And they would become stories of overcoming. They would be stories about overcoming obstacles, finding the strength within, finding the strength to take the seat on the bus and not move, the strength of a mountain to be unmoved. And so eventually, as we tell stories over the years, they begin to morph and they begin to change a little bit. And then you begin to teach the story based on what you want your son or daughter to learn that day. You tell them the story when they come home crying from school. You use a story about Martin Luther King as a boy and how he felt something in his heart, but he had to find the courage or gather a group of people with him to support him. And we begin to tell these stories so that they mean something rather than that they just represent history. Do you see the difference? That's how myths come alive in our everyday life. That's how we can build today the myths for tomorrow that people can use to support their growth and look back on in the days ahead and in the future way out. I never know how time flows when I stand up here. We're doing pretty good. So being able to look at our current modern stories and find the principal roots within them, and then teach those principles going forward, is a very powerful technique, and it gives us a powerful opportunity as we continue to evolve, as we've heard about this last month, evolve into that opening of the global heart. The awakening of that global heart, the awakening of that initiation. One of the myths that we get stuck in a lot, one of the myths that has really helped to create the world that we often see when we watch the news or when we leave here after a beautiful Sunday and head back into the real world, the other world out there. One of the myths that world has succumbed to is the myth of separation. It's the myth that we are separate from one another. It's the myth that we're separate from God. It's the myth of punishment, the myth of wrongdoing, that myth of good and bad. I've done something wrong, so I must be punished. But I hate myself so much that I have to project it on you and believe that you've done something so wrong that you need to be punished. This is one of the core myths that we really need to bust. We need to bust this myth, okay? I mean, we need to let it go. That myth of separation, when you work and live in a world that creates from your thoughts, okay? See, here's another myth. I'm going to throw another one in here. It's a myth that what's going on out here is causal. It's not. It is effect. The only thing that's causal, when you trace it back, the only thing that causes anything is thought. Thought causes. Okay? Your thoughts about what's going on out there creates tomorrow. Your thought about what's going on in your family creates the tomorrow of your family. It manifests in your behavior, and it manifests in the people who react to you and your behavior, and then their thoughts compound the whole thing. And so we've manifested a world based on punishment. Do you see that? Do you see? I mean, it's ingrained everywhere out there. But if I let myself believe the myth that out there causes me to do something, I have bought another false myth, because it doesn't. My thoughts about what goes on out there is what causes me to act. Okay? My thoughts about what's going on out there is what affects how I interact with you or with other people. Okay? So this is not really new to us. If we come here on if you're new to this center, it might be new to you, but we're hearing this more and more all around, that our thoughts are what manifests out there. So if I'm buying the myth of separation, I am going to manifest more separation. If I'm buying the myth of punishment, we'll just call it the myth of punishment, then I'm going to manifest more and more punishment out there. But we're all caught up in this, and it's complex. Like I talked about last time, it can be frightening to look at this from that perspective, from the perspective of fearful. How can I go up against such a huge machine? My little self. But remember the little gnats we heard about. Sometimes small is the way to get in. Sometimes just being still and reflecting back doesn't mean I'm buying into it. When the gnat replied to Ereshkigal, "You feel hurt, your heart is sad," he wasn't agreeing that she was sadness. He was simply reflecting, you are in pain, you feel pain. And by mirroring that reflection, it gave her a moment of pause. Wow, somebody hears me. And from that space, she could realize, I feel pain, but I am not pain. I feel sadness, but I am not sadness. I can go on from here. So taking that story, taking those ideas into our daily life can be a very powerful thing to overcome this myth of separation. But sometimes it really helps to be able to look out here and get a glimmer of hope from somewhere, right? I mean, because really, it could look pretty dark out there. So I want to share with you a couple of places that I have found where I get hope, where I get great hope. The first place I want to tell you about is, and you guys are going to laugh, but that's okay because I'm at home here and I know you're not going to hold it against me. I get great hope from superhero movies. Okay? I do. I love the Marvel universe. I love the Marvel superheroes. And here's why. Because I see them through the eyes of mythology. I see Iron Man struggle with an ego that's even bigger than mine. Okay? I see the Hulk have to deal with his shadow, his anger issues. And when I look at the last Marvel movie, which I won't get all bogged down in because many of you here may have not seen it, even though I'm going to be up here preaching the gospel of Marvel movies, okay? Many of you may have not seen it. But because the Hulk is in the process of dealing with his shadow, the strength didn't even show up in the last movie. And it left his co-workers, his team, a little in the lurch because he couldn't manifest the Hulk because he was in the process of trying to sort out his shadow. That's a beautiful thing. To see that up on the big screen, I think it's a glorious thing. And I love it. Another thing I love is a little show that comes on Monday evenings at 8 o'clock on NBC. I'll repeat that later for you because you're going to want to tune in. All right? This show is called American Ninja Warriors. Okay? Yeah, it's funny. It is until you watch it, and then it's heart-opening. Oh my goodness. It's heart-opening. Many of you may have watched this show. Some of you may be closet ninja warriors. I don't know. You might be. Okay? So here's what I love about American Ninja Warrior. It's been on about 10 seasons. Started out very low budget, very often very cultish, not cultish really, but you know what I mean. Small following, small group, low budget, low production value. But over the years, it's gotten more and more popular. American Ninja Warrior is inclusive. Okay? It's so inclusive that women run right alongside the men. They don't start out in a different place like in golf where the tee is up here. Okay? They don't start out in a different place. They don't have an easier obstacle course. They run the same bloody obstacle course as the men. And that's what Ninja Warrior is about. I realized, oh my goodness, they may not even know what Ninja Warrior is. So let me tell you, there's an obstacle course. Now, these obstacles look impossible. I am not kidding. They really do look impossible. And for many, many runs, they seem impossible until one person figures out how to overcome that obstacle. Meanwhile, everybody's watching them and they're learning from that one person who's on the obstacle course today. or at this time, many of them run in a day. I don't mean just today, but so they run the obstacle course. They climb, they jump, they balance, it's very strength oriented. It's very coordination oriented, but it's just obstacles. So in the metaphor, we all face obstacles, don't we? We all face obstacles every day. As a country, we are facing some obstacles. As a people, as humanity growing and evolving, we face obstacles. So on American Ninja Warrior, they all support each other. It is a competition, okay? But they are not, and they are competing against each other, but they are mostly competing against the obstacle course. They are not competing against each other. And what they do is they support each other. So while one person is on this obstacle course, everybody else is out there cheering them on. Let me hear what that would sound like if you were cheering me on my obstacle course. Come on, cheer me on. Yeah, absolutely. And so sometimes they're cheering and they chant their name. Johnny, 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 Annette, Annette. They cheer them on as they run this obstacle course. Now I want to ask you guys something. How many of you would love having a cheering section for your daily obstacles? Barbara, Barbara, Barbara. Okay? Let me tell you, you do have a cheering section for your obstacles. Every day when you're out there facing your obstacles, the unseen realm is cheering you on. Whether you think of them as angels or spirit guides or power animals or trees or birds or owls or fish in the sea, they are all cheering you on. They are all singing your praises as you overcome your obstacles or as you fall in the water. Because let me tell you, on ANW, American Ninja Warrior, they always are falling in the water. And when they come up out of that water, the people are cheering them on just as much. They're not like, oh, for a moment, they feel bad for them for a moment. But by the time they pop up out of that water, they are cheering them on for their effort and their willingness to come back again. Come back again and do it over. Start over. Learn. Watch the next one. Watch the next one. And another thing they do on Ninja Warriors is they take their celebrity, they take the power that they've gained from being on stage, and they use it for good. Like this. Kevin Bull was a rookie a few years ago. He came on, and he's one of the people who overcame an obstacle that nobody else could overcome. Nobody could get past this obstacle until Kevin Bull did. And he thought outside the box, and he did something completely different than everybody else. And everybody was like, wow, we never saw it that way. Now, Kevin Bull suffers from a condition called alopecia. And alopecia is a condition where all your hair falls out. So he doesn't have a lick of hair on his body. Okay? Well, that's okay for a guy. But some guys would be like, no, it's not. But it's sort of okay for a guy. But it's even harder for women to deal with that. But women have alopecia as well. And children get alopecia. Children have the condition of alopecia. So what Kevin Bull has done with his celebrity is he started the Children's Alopecia Project, CAP for short. And he speaks about it every time you see him. He talks about his kids. And the kids come and they don't have wigs on. They sport cute little unicorn horns. And they cheer on their guy, their hero, Kevin Bull, while he's running this course. And a lot of people have learned about alopecia from his platform on this course. And he's made a difference in thousands of children's lives because of that. One of the guys, Flip Rodriguez, always used to run with a mask on. For years, he ran the course with a mask on, until one year he decided, I'm taking the mask off, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my platform and I'm going to talk about the sexual abuse I experienced as a child. And so he made himself public with that. And from that point, thousands upon thousands of people reached out to him. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for talking about what you'd been through. It made a difference in my life, and I've been able to overcome my past because of you. And the third example I'm going to give you is one I saw a couple of weeks ago. A woman would always travel to the competition with her husband, and she was in a wheelchair, suffering from a connective tissue disease that is supposed to just get worse and get worse and get worse. But this year, she got out of the chair and she ran the first obstacle on the course. And here's what I love about this platform. They didn't just tell you about it afterwards and not give her airtime, because let's face it, she's not going to make it to the end of the course. It's not about that on this program. It's about the story. It's about overcoming. And so they gave her a whole segment telling her story about how her desire to run this course, her desire to practice and train with her husband, gave her the power and the will to overcome the pain associated with getting out of this chair and running that course. And she did. She fell in on the first obstacle, but it was incredibly powerful to watch her do this. I mean, I felt like I could conquer anything after watching her story. So, what does this have to do with myth? What does this have to do with the global heart awakening? I'll tell you what it has to do with it. This illustrates the change in our consciousness. It's a change away from showing head-to-head battle, tear each other down. Do you remember when that was all that was on TV? Tear each other down. Housewives ripping each other's weave out. I mean, whatever, you know, but that's not all it is anymore. Now we have programs like American Ninja Warrior that showcases people overcoming their challenges. It showcases people in support of one another. It shows people learning from their failures, learning from each other's failures, and using that to spring forward in the next season to do even better the next time around. And I don't know about you, but I need stories like that. When I let myself get bogged down with all the other stuff I see, and I use stuff loosely here, all the other stuff I see on TV, frankly, this is a welcome breath of fresh air. I love it, not just conceptually, but I feel love in my soul and in my heart when I watch this program. And so that's where I want to leave you guys today. I want to leave you feeling that potential, feeling that possibility, realizing that there is a whole audience cheering you on, whether you hear it with your ear or not. Hear it with your soul, because it is. The trees, the sound of the wind rustling in the trees. Yay, rah, you go. The chirping of the birds. You go, you got it. You get up and go again, try again, it's okay. It's all there for you. And as we build our myths for the future, let us not leave it to the institutions to tell our stories, but let us tell the stories ourselves, with our mouths, with our brains, with our hearts. Let us talk to our children rather than just plopping them down in front of a screen or in front of a book or in front of a teacher to share the wisdom that we want the future to hold. And so I thank you very much. Namaste.
Hi, I'm David Alt, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.